I don't even know if I could.
Do you play the middle or the top?
All right, so today is July 17th, 2023. We are here in the Benjamin F. Payton Room in the archives on the campus of the lovely Tuskegee University. We are here with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program as a part of the MFP project. And my name is Krystin Anderson.
My name is Donovan Carter.
I'm Asha Clarke.
And I'm Marna Weston.
And we are here with lovely
Lanice Middleton.
And could you spell your name for us as well?
Lanice, middle initial P as in Paul. Last name Middleton, Middleton.
Awesome. Thank you for being here with us today, Ms. Middleton. So if we could begin and you tell us about when and where you were born.
I was born in Prairie View, Texas, on the campus of Prairie View. That was in June 19th, 1939.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about the circumstance surrounding your birth? How did you come to be born on the campus?
Well, my parents met in Prairie View and were married there. And then I came along. And it just happened to be on June 19th. And of course, it was celebrated in Texas long before probably most of you all heard about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was your birthdays like growing up as a kid?
Oh, my mother always made me a cake. And it had strawberry icing. Mm-hmm. And she made that cake for me until she was over 90.
Wow.
And I always enjoyed the cake. I don't ever remember having a big birthday party. The one I can remember, I was a Girl Scout and we were at summer camp where the Air Museum is now. And she made cupcakes and everybody got a cupcake. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed that birthday party.
That's lovely. So what were your parents studying or doing at Prairie View?
My father was the dean of the School of Agriculture there. And my mother went to Texas to teach. She taught English.
Okay.
And during that time, couples were not allowed to work on the campus, so one had to give up the job, and my mother gave up hers.
Gotcha. So do you have siblings? Were they also born on campus?
No, I'm an only child.
Oh, wow. So what was the community like around you?
Well, for the most part, we lived in the faculty area. And there were children around for me to play with. There was a little elementary school up the street. And I would get to go up there and eat with the children every now and then, so that was a pleasure. We lived in a house on a corner, which was across from the gym. And I can remember during football season, those were the biggest men I had ever seen in my life. And they would all come out of that gym going to the football field, which was just up the street. And they were running with the big helmets. That was not the easiest thing to watch. So if I saw them coming out, I'd go back and stand in the front door just in case.
Oh, very cool. So did you grow up attending those football games or being a part of homecoming? Or?
I can remember I must have been about 3 or 4. And my father took me to a football game, and that was kind of across the street from where we lived. And I remember becoming very restless, and I thought it was time for us to leave. And he was just beginning to enjoy the football game. And sometimes when I think back about it, I say, "Oh, poor Daddy, had to give up that football game." But that was all I could take of that. And I was so small I could hardly make it from one step to the other. So somebody had to get up and lift me down.
Oh, it sounds like you had such a sweet father. Can you tell us both of your parents' names?
Oh, my mother's name is Eunice, and my father's name is Lawrence.
Right. And you know your mother's maiden name as well?
Bloodworth.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And where did your name come from? Did it come from anyone?
My name is a combination of their names. It's L.A. for Lawrence and N-I-C-E for Eunice.
Awesome.
And it often is pronounced Lanice. Interesting, the pronunciations.
Do you know how your father came to become a dean at the university?
I don't know exactly how he earned that title, but I can remember that he worked with youth groups throughout Texas with the young men, teaching them how to farm, as it was in that day. And, but I really don't know. I have to investigate.
Did your father also attend that university?
No. Florida A&M, Ames, Hampton.
And your mother, did she attend university?
She is a Fiskite. She went to Fisk. Mm-hmm.
And you said your parents had met each other on Prairie View's campus?
They met each other on Prairie View's campus.
Okay. Do you know the story of how they met?
I really don't. It's a very tiny community, so I'm sure there were not a whole lot of single people on that campus because it's, if memory serves me, it's away from the city, like Houston. You have to do a little traveling to get there. So I don't know who introduced them. I really don't. Mm-hmm.
And when is the last time you've been back to Prairie View?
I've never been back. Wow. All the memories I have are from the time I spent there. I had a department head who worked there, and I would question him. I said, "Was there a house on the corner across from the gym?" No. I said, "Was there a hospital not too far, on the campus?" No. I said, "Well, was there an elementary school not too far from the hospital?" No. So I imagine I would be lost, really lost going back there.
And when did you leave?
We left Prairie View in 1946.
Do you know why you left?
Dr. Patterson asked my father if he would come here to be dean of the School of Agriculture. They were classmates at Ames.
Okay.
So both of your parents were educators. So did you have a strong educational history growing up, and what schools did you go to? What was it like?
Well, I attended the Chambliss Children's House from 1st grade through 8th grade. It was a school that was set up basically years ago to accommodate the children of faculty and staff on campus. Unfortunately, time took the Chambliss Children's House away. The building still stands on campus, but it's now the band cottage. Okay. And then I went to the high school, Tuskegee Institute High School. And that building still stands. I think recently it accommodates the police department and the Tuskegee-Macon County Library.
So can you tell us about what it was like at Tuskegee Institute High? What the teachers might have been like, what the other classmates been?
Well, you know, when you look back about it, you remember the teachers that you enjoyed, you know, how they made classes seem interesting. And then you have that group of teachers that you might not like to see again. So it was just a combination of both. And I really have to say, I think all of our teachers, and I am talking about more than 60 years ago, but they cared about us. You know, they went that extra mile. Your mom would get that telephone call, or your daddy would get that telephone call, or the principal might escort you off the campus, you know. But it was really a time, I think, when our teachers cared. And I have to say, too, I think it was a time when students were attentive and kind of like that attention, you know, that they got. And we were careful about getting in trouble anyway, because all the neighbors would know about it before you could get home.
Very cool. Were you in any clubs or after-school activities?
No, I really wasn't. Oh, no, I wasn't. Would love to have been in the choir. Still can't sing. I would love to be in the choir.
Cool.
And do you know what churches you attended while you were here in Tuskegee and also
I
in Peru?
joined St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. I was confirmed, I think, in 1953. I really never knew any other church because my father would always tell me, whatever you choose, as long as you go. So, while they were joining Greenwood Missionary Baptist Church, I was joining St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. And I've been there ever since.
Wow. And who was the pastor there?
We have a supply priest right now. We don't have a priest. Father Liston Garfield retired several years ago. In fact, I guess it's been about 10 years. So we have a supply priest. That person can come in and as we celebrate communion and other church affairs.
And why the Episcopal Church for you over the Baptist?
Oh, all my friends were going to the Episcopal Church. The lady down the street, shortly after we moved to Tuskegee, came by with this basket over her arm. I kind of wondered what it was. I never asked her. But then one Saturday she told me, "Tell your mother I will be by for you in the morning for Sunday school." Sunday school. Anyway, I toddled on across the street behind her, and I've been going ever since.
It is a rare treat to interview someone who's had such a long expanse of life. And I'm sitting here thinking about how many presidents of not only this institution, but of the United States that you have continued to live through their lives. When did you first think about the president of the United States? I mean, Roosevelt was president when you were born in your young life, and then there was Truman. When did you become aware of that whole idea of a president and the nation? And did you pay any attention to the nation's leaders at that level, the presidents?
So I remember Roosevelt, the name Roosevelt. You know, my parents read the paper and they would watch the news and they would discuss whatever the topics were of the day. But I can remember Roosevelt. So,
do you remember when he died? You would have been 5 or 6. You wouldn't have been very old.
Not really. I don't remember much about that.
What do you remember of World War II, if anything? You also would have been very young.
I can remember, I think, when it ended, because the community came out with the bands and the horns and the flags and whatever you could make noise with. And it was almost dark. I remember that. And it was confusing to me for a little while because I couldn't imagine, what these people out here at dark? I was told to be home by the time those lights come on. So I was worried about folks getting in trouble because my parents were there with me. But what was all that commotion about?
As a young adult, do you remember the assassination of President Kennedy?
Oh, yes, I do.
What was that like?
Yes, I do. That was just such a sad time. And it was, like the whole world was involved in it. It was so quiet on this campus, and people spoke about it. And of course, we watched everything, we could on television. But it was really a very sad time.
How about Bobby Kennedy?
Yes, it was sad too, but it wasn't quite like it was for JFK.
And of course, if I'm going to ask you about Bobby Kennedy and President King, I have to ask you about April 4th, 1968. Where were you when you heard that Martin Luther King had been killed?
I was in my living room, and my children had learned when the news came on to call us so we could watch the news. And somebody called me and asked me if I had heard it, and I said yes. And I can still remember being in my living room talking on the phone and telling the kids to be quiet so we could hear. And that was unreal.
Could you speak a little bit more about that time, maybe from 55 up to 68, the civil rights movement going on? What was that like for you? How did that fit into your life, if at all?
I was not active, per se, with the civil rights movement. My children were little. I had just come through a divorce and just trying to keep up with them. And I'm a sandwich child, so I had children and then I had my parents. So I kind of kept in mind what I needed to do at that time. I can remember the students going to Montgomery to try to participate at the end of that Selma March. And I can just remember praying that they would all come back safe and sound. We in Tuskegee were having a difficult time trying to vote. And we were having a difficult time trying to get jobs in the downtown area. When you went to vote, we had a board of registrars, and sometimes that board was closed. You had no way of contacting anyone to find out when it would open. Then they would ask you to write a paragraph. They'd give you a little card, and no matter if words were misspelled on there, you were supposed to write whatever was on that cardboard. We had to pay what we call a poll tax. When you registered and voted, you had to pay $2, I think it was, to get your little card saying that you could vote. Finally, the community came together and we decided not to trade downtown. It was never mentioned officially as a boycott. It was called Trade with Your Friends. Now, Tuskegee was a very unique place. We had our own grocery stores, we had the post office, we had service stations, we had cleaners, barbers. We really didn't have to go downtown. So the town dried up and most of the white people moved away. And it just hasn't quite been the same since. But we did get to vote. And during that time, too, one of the representatives in Montgomery wanted to cut off a part of Macon County. And that didn't go over too well. But anyway, we got the privilege to vote.
I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the voting thing. Selma was a huge issue when Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed, and there was a march, and then the Panthers came and were registering people to vote through Lowndes County everywhere. Did the Panthers come here and help organize any of the voting?
We had what we called the Tuskegee Civic Association, which was made up of the older citizens of Tuskegee, and the Black Panthers were a younger group. So for the most part, I think they worked outside of the Tuskegee area, still in Macon County, but outside the Tuskegee area.
And kind of going off of that, what ways were young people, I guess, becoming active? Did you know perhaps classmates or neighborhood kids or friends who were becoming active in different ways? And what would that have looked like?
What, you mean now or then?
Then.
Well, I had some students. I worked in the Department of Agriculture, and I had students who were very active, very vocal, and very much participating.
Do you recall any of the names of those students?
One was Wendell Paris and his brother George. I'm looking right in her face and can't remember her name. Go, maybe it'll come back in a little bit. Sammy Young. What was that girl's name? She was president of the SGA. And she lived in Montgomery. He will come back in a little bit. I can see her face, but I can't call her name right this moment.
And you mentioned how you worked in the agriculture department. You were instructing at this time or assisting instructing?
No, I was an administrative assistant.
Okay.
I worked my way up from a clerk typist to an administrative assistant. I was only there 40 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
A few. So we've mentioned the NAACP and kind of these organizations like the Black Panthers who are well known. Were there any local or smaller organizations that you heard of or saw coming up?
Not that I can think of. Not that I can think of. Just the Tuskegee Civic Association. And then when the movement got to the point that college students were interested. But I don't know that, other than the SGA, I don't recall anything. May have been, I just don't recall.
Okay. And to go back to something you said earlier, that the town started drying up. What other things do you think led to that, or other things impacted that drying up?
One thing, the Black is Beautiful theme was exciting, I guess, to us who had not had an opportunity to get into these, to be elected into various offices. And at that time, it was part of, I guess, it's what some of the candidates were running on as an officer. For example, our first Black mayor was Johnny Ford, and he loved Black is Beautiful theme. And I think somehow that possibly frightened some of the whites. and they did a white flight. So where our stores were all occupied downtown, very few of them are now.
And do you know when Mayor Ford was elected? Do you know what year that may have been? Roughly.
It must have been around 70. It was in the 70s, I think, because he stayed in office. And Ford stayed in office a long time. He did 4 or 5 terms, 4-year terms.
And do you remember your first time voting? Did you vote for him in these elections, or were you able to vote at this time?
Yes, I was able to vote.
Okay.
I can remember my mother didn't drive, and so one time we had an election, and my children were little, and it was hot. And she got out the car and went on across the street to vote. And a few minutes later, she came back and said to me, "A lot of people have died to give you the opportunity to vote." And that must have been back around 63, 64. I haven't missed a term yet. I have voted.
Do you remember your first time voting?
Do I remember my first time vote?
Yeah. What was that? Who you voted? Do you remember who you voted for, perhaps? Or?
I don't even remember. I don't even remember whether that was a city election or a county election. I honestly don't recall. No, I don't remember.
Well, you've been to the polls that many times. That's a good thing.
Can you tell us what the process was like for you to get your voter registration?
Oh, I had a boss who worked for the United States Department of Agriculture, and we were talking one day about voting, and he was sharing with me his experiences of getting people to vote as he worked around in the county. And so he said, "By the way, have you registered to vote?" I said, "No." He said, "Get up." And downtown we went. And I guess I was most fortunate because I walked in, there was no one there. I sat down at the table and I remembered to write everything, and I did. And a few minutes later, they gave me my little piece of paper. I paid the poll tax and came out. I did not have a bad experience with that.
What were your thoughts about Barack Obama when you first heard about him or saw him and knew he was going to run for president of the United States?
I just couldn't believe it for a moment. He was just such a breath of fresh air. I said, I don't know whether I just don't know whether he's gonna win this election or not. But I tell you, that was as crowded as I have ever seen our voting polls.
How long did you stand in line to vote for him?
I don't think I stood in line more than 30 minutes because the line was constantly moving. But I tell you what I did. I went home and I got in my bed. And anywhere they had voting reports, I wouldn't watch. And then I said, I'm so chicken-livered about this. I just didn't know which way to go. After a while, I heard such cheering. I heard the band playing. I said, he got it. And it was a wonderful experience with him, his wife, his children. Just wonderful.
And after he got elected, were you happy with his presidency?
I was. I really was. I was happy with it.
I have talked to some people who had expressed during his first campaign or even his second campaign fear for his life, that maybe something would happen to him perhaps, or Did you ever feel that way or talk to anyone who felt concerned about him?
I really didn't. I really didn't give that a thought. No, I don't remember being afraid for him. I don't know. He was just gonna make it.
Well, yes, we can. That was just
Yes.
So here in Tuskegee, Montgomery is less than an hour away, with such a long history as the seat of the Confederacy and such active KKK. What did you learn about them when you came to live here, and have you ever had any interactions?
I would hear people talk about the KKK. Living on campus, what I want to say, was almost an oasis. Years and years ago, when we were getting the VA set up, the KKK threatened to get Moten, who was the president at that time, and they were to march down through our main street. And of course, I'm told that the men had shotguns, and they were all the way down the street in the trees. But I heard that little brigade just went right on through Tuskegee. They didn't bother anybody, and nobody bothered them. The one thing I can remember, I was still in grade school, and I crossed our busy street, and there was a piece of wood burning on the building next door. And I saw it, and I went back to tell my parents about it. And they told me, just don't worry about it. Go ahead, enjoy your day at school. And so I'm assuming that was one of those wooden crosses that they had placed on that building. It was a brick building, so it didn't do any damage. I'm trying to think what else. I don't really remember having so much trouble. There were 2 or 3 incidents just as we got into the trade with your own friends downtown. My mother sent me down there to get some powdered sugar to make the icing for my cake. And I went in to Piggly Wiggly, and there were 3 people standing there talking, and they were standing in front of the shelf where the sugar was. And so I said, "Excuse me, please." I remember I said it 3 times. They didn't even see me, nor did they hear me. So I said, "I need the sugar, I got to go home." So I just reached behind them. I didn't touch them. I didn't need to touch them to get the sugar. This lady turned around and told me, "Don't you ever reach over me again." And I remember I took about 10 steps, and I remember turning around, I just stomped my foot at her. And she drew back. I was like, "Lady, I'm not fixing to hit you. I'm going on at the store with my birthday cake." Now, I remember that. The other thing that I remember, if you can include it, my parents, well, we were all going different ways. My father went to Washington. My mother went out to Kansas to visit her mother, and I went to visit my father's siblings. And my friend's father got me a flight down to St. Petersburg. But on the way back, I had to take the bus, so it would be convenient for folks to meet me in Opelika, since that bus didn't come through Tuskegee. And I got on the bus, and the bus driver told me, "You must sit in the back of the bus." Oh, what did he tell me that for? I cried and I cried and I cried. So when he got to the first stop, he got up and he came back and he said, "I didn't mean you had to sit on the absolute back seat," which is what I went right back there and sat on that big old seat, in the back of the bus. He said, "I didn't mean that. You had to sit behind the last white person on the bus. That didn't help. I cried some more. So when I finally got, I don't know which way I was going, but when I finally got to my stop, I was, of course, the last to get off the bus. And he told me, he said, I am so sorry. I'm just so sorry. He said, it's the law. And he said, but I wish you the best. And I was sorry that I really didn't pay attention, but I cried some more. You know, just to have his name, just to know whatever became of him. But anyway, that's one of those things. I was trying to think if I had my experiences were so slim. I don't remember really anything else.
Do you remember how old you may have been at that time?
Yeah, I had to been 16 or 17 because I had a driver's license.
Very cool. So you mentioned going to St. Petersburg in Florida, if I'm correct? Is that where your dad's family is from? Are they still
He's
there?
from a little place called Williston.
Yeah.
Wilson, Levy County.
Levy County.
Yes, ma'am.
We will talk after this is over because I need some help on finding this, about some property that he had. His father bought some property, and then one of the sons of that man wanted to buy the property back. So my father sold it to him with the understanding that his parents' graves would remain where they are on that property. And that's all I want to know, if those graves are still there and if somebody would take a picture of them. I remember seeing them when I went to visit, but I'd just like to know if they honored his wishes.
Wow. And do your family still live there?
No. My father was the baby and the last to die. He had one second cousin, I think, and he was helping me with the family history, and he died several years ago, so I don't know which way to go now.
Gotcha. So what did your father ever tell you about FAMU and his experience there?
You know, I don't think he talked about FAMU. I don't think he really talked about any place that, now the one school he went to, and it was kind of humorous. He said on Saturday nights, the guys would come in from their jobs or whatever they were doing, and I don't remember which school it was, but he was laughing about how the guys would start on the top floor borrowing clothes to wear on a date. They'd get a tie, you'd get a shirt, get the jacket, get the pants, all now from going up and down the floors getting clean clothes. And now that just amused him. He said, you could put all those clothes on dirty body and then go and ask the guys to share their clothes with you.
Very cool.
I'm going to take us back to something you said a little earlier. You mentioned how your parents, when you saw that probably burning cross, they said, don't worry about it, go on and enjoy your day. Do you remember protecting your children in a similar way from maybe Jim Crow violence that was going on in the area or any instances of civil rights violences that you heard?
No, as I said, we were just kind of protected. We didn't do much business downtown. Now, there were many, many families, I'm sure, who owed the storekeepers money for food and clothing. I just didn't know about that. And these things I have learned since I've been grown. You know, people talk a little bit more when you get older. But at the time, you know, it makes a difference to them. I remember one friend telling me that his mother had a little account at one of the grocery stores. And he said he hadn't paid much attention to what his mother had been doing. She would go in there and pick out what she wanted. And he said one day he decided he would go in there with her. He said he didn't say anything. He just watched to see, what the storekeeper would do. And she was paying him, and he was adding to whatever she paid him. Like if she gave him $10, then she would only get credit for 8. Just taking their money.
I'd like to take you on just a short journey on entertainment, television and radio, and how entertainment had an influence on our society. I'll just mention something, and you just give me whatever reaction you have. Aretha Franklin.
It took me kind of a long time to what do I want to say? To appreciate Aretha.
Mm-hmm. Did you like Mahalia better? Is that what it was, or?
No, I don't think so. I didn't hear a lot of gospel music in my house. Mm-hmm. But then every now and then, how singers come out and you hear tunes and you latch on to them.
Mm-hmm. How about Muhammad Ali?
I had a hard time kind of trying to understand what is he talking about? I had a very difficult time with him. Mm-hmm. I finally think I got it. Mm-hmm.
There were some television shows that tried to illuminate race and understanding that were very popular. The Jeffersons, All in the Family, Sanford and Son. Did you watch any of those?
I did.
Did you have a favorite one?
Every last one of them.
Every last one? What do you think about those shows?
I just enjoyed them, partly for the message they were giving, and the humor was great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Walter Cronkite.
Yep. So you watch the news, whatever your parents turn to, that's what you watch. So yes, I watched a lot of Mr. Walter.
Mm-hmm. And what about things like, this is kind of crazy, but Lawrence Welk?
I watched Lawrence Welk. TV was not always on 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, Lawrence, you got down to the last. Lawrence Welk was the last thing on the last channel, so you listen.
He was what was on.
He was what was on.
Do you have a favorite artist, a singer or someone like that you feel exemplifies what you feel about the times? Or a favorite one? Anybody?
Oh my gosh! Don't do that to me.
James Brown?
James Brown. It took a while to get to James Brown too. Mm-hmm. It took a pretty good while. But I love Luther Vandross. Mm. Oh my gosh.
We were listening to Luther on the way down here.
He was in Montgomery one year around Christmas, and my daughter bought me a ticket and treated me to see Luther. Mm-hmm. I like Gladys Knight.
Oh yeah. We listened to her on the way down here too.
Mm-hmm. Did what?
We were listening to her. We were listening to neither one of us. That first big song.
Yes. And Midnight Train to Georgia.
And you're the best thing that ever happened to me. That's a good one. We didn't listen to that one, but I like that one. I guess just one more. We had talked about the presidents and all these folks. I didn't ask you about your favorite president from Tuskegee. And maybe you don't have a favorite president because it all means the same to you. But if you could single out something from the administration, one of the presidents that still kind of sits with you or resonates with you.
I guess I like Dr. Patterson, maybe because, my father's connection with him. But he was such a gentle person. The students liked him. You would see him out on campus with them. So I kind of enjoyed him. Now the other one was, the next president was Luther Foster. And we were, we shared a duplex with them. And so he was always very gentle and easy to get along with, and always called me by my first name.
Oh, you know what I didn't want? You said your name was P like Paul, but you didn't tell us what your middle name was. I mean, your middle
Oh,
name
it's
isn't
P
Paul.
for Potts.
Potts.
Mm-hmm.
Potts.
Potts, Lawrence and Eunice Potts.
Speaking of Tuskegee and the university, you've been here in the city for so long, but of course working with the university. Could you talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen, whether that be in the student body, in administration, or in the city throughout the time that you've been here?
Well, for on campus, when I really became aware of the college campus, the students who attended, I want to say maybe in the 50s, early 60s, their attitude about their education to me seemed like they were very, very serious. They had to come here, get that education, and move on. And the community, or a lot of them, accepted them into their homes because they couldn't afford to stay on campus. And they were truly grateful. It seems to me as time has gone by, on a whole, seems like the students' gratitude for an education changed. Maybe I changed, I don't know. And when I say that, sometimes I have this picture of looking out of the window in Millbank Hall. All of us, faculty and staff, had old hoopties in the parking lot. Students had the brand new cars, you know. And then it got to the point where it seems to me that they wanted the faculty members to do things for them that they could do for themselves. When I was in school, you needed a copy, you better type that copy. Few copy machines during that time. But, you know, whatever you needed, you had to do it. Now, sometimes the faculty members will stand there and they will copy whatever it is that they need so that all the class members have a copy. They don't have to go out there and beat the bushes and find some kind person who will make a copy or go to the printing office. And then too, sometimes I hear from faculty members how students won't study. They won't take advantage of what's offered in the classroom. Either they don't listen or they miss classes. And then at the end, on reckoning day, they're standing in line 40, 100 feet deep. Is there anything I can do to make up for this grade? We didn't have that. Either you took the class then or you didn't. You know, you missed it, you missed it. Now, for the campus, the buildings that have been erected since I've been here are quite a few. And I'm trying to think what else has gone on. There was one thing that I did. I've been very curious about who was buried in our university cemetery. So, I'm not too friendly with cemeteries, but I can remember when we came to Tuskegee, we lived in Dorothy Home, which is kind of across the street from the chapel and the cemetery. And I can remember as a little girl wondering why it was so, I don't want to say just unkept. And my mother explained to me that it was a cemetery. Well, whatever it was, I didn't want to go there. But as the years have gone by and I've had to go back and forth, I've known several of the people who are now buried there. But I was curious, who else is buried there? And what contribution did they make to Tuskegee? So I wrote a book called Tuskegee University Cemetery Stories. And
When was it published?
last year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm now trying to see which way I want to go for something else historic for Tuskegee. You were asking what else? Now, I think it was the mid-'60s before I can remember that we had any white instructors. And then in the mid-'60s, they just poured in.
What do you think caused that?
Oh, I think it was it was just a change in time. See, integration was in, and so I'm sure they wanted to have a little something on the resume to say that they had had some experience at a black school. Some just passed through, and some came and stayed for a good while.
Now, working in the agricultural department, did you know of any professors who had a big impact on students? Or did you hear students talk a lot about certain professors more than others?
Oh, yes. We had one very young instructor, and the kids seemed to have really enjoyed, his classes. We had one instructor who was older, much older, and the kids would complain about him. Oh, they would complain about him. As a matter of fact, a gentleman who was a student when my father was dean got in the class and started cussing the teacher out. He told him, "Don't you come back in here. Don't you come back in this classroom." So he said, I ran upstairs to your father and I said, what can I do? What can I do? I got to stay in this class. I got to graduate. And Daddy told him, you go back downstairs and you apologize. And he said he went back and apologized and he let him back in the class. But, I guess all of us need to kind of brush up on our techniques and change our way of teaching after a while.
So you mentioned white teachers coming to the school for the first time. What was your personal experience with integration?
For the university, it was sort of mixed because some of them came in with an attitude, ooh, I'm gonna fix this little school right up. And I might add, they got fixed right up and out. It just, it was like, we can do better than this. I know we can fix this. They're too slow on doing this and too slow on doing that and blah, 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 blah.
So I want to go back to your childhood a bit more. You mentioned how we talked about your father being in the agricultural department and, of course, being in Tuskegee. There's a lot of farmland here. Did your family ever, if not perhaps participate in farming, did your parents maybe garden?
Oh, yes. My father had a garden every year. And we had greens and sweet potatoes and strawberries, peaches.
Ooh, strawberries.
I tried to keep it going after he died, but I just didn't have it. And I love strawberries.
Yeah. Strawberry cake.
Yeah. Strawberry cake.
Yeah. And what else? So you say greens, sweet potato, strawberries. What else?
Corn. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we had chickens in the backyard. Wow. And my father decided he would add turkeys. Well, now that was very nice when he was in town and he was feeding them and making sure they had water. And when he was out of town, I was in charge. Didn't care much for that.
So was that a common chore for you to go and tend to the garden, or was it his personal project and nobody touched anything?
No, he would come out here. You want to eat some of this? You better come on out here. It was always in a joking manner. But no, my mother was out there with him, but he enjoyed it. I remember one year he planted me some sugar cane.
Wow.
And the guys in the neighborhood decided that it was about ready. And they came through and chomped on that sugar cane. Oh, he was so upset. He told me, never plant any more sugar cane. And he never did. And my mother would sit under the trees in the backyard and wait for the guys to come home from school, because they would take the peaches and the figs. Yeah. So she would sit out there and greet them.
And last one, what types of things, with all these materials, what did your parents cook a lot? What was your favorite things to eat growing up?
Oh, my mother did all of the cooking. During that time, we didn't have, well, I won't say we didn't have many places, but my parents just didn't eat out a lot. They ate at home. And we did not necessarily have a place that guests could come and eat. So she would prepare meals for my father's guests. And I got to wash the dishes and iron the tablecloths. But she would always have, usually she had baked chicken and homemade rolls. And greens or cabbage or whatever.
Most people can remember back to their grandparents and what it was like growing up with them. What are the longer memories you have of your family? Could you tell us about your grandparents and, if possible, your great-grandparents a little bit, just so we know a little bit about whatever part of it you know? But most people at least know the grandparents, but past that it gets kind of, I don't know too much.
Well, I had one grandparent, and that was my mother's mother.
And what was her name?
Her name was Mary Bell Barr Bloodworth.
Mm-hmm. And did she live at the family home you all together, or did
she lived in Nashville for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then my mother and her sisters decided, my aunt got a job teaching in Kansas, and they decided my grandmother didn't need to stay there anymore by herself, so she moved to Kansas with them. And my grandmother was so sweet and patient with me. She could make the best apple pies in this world. Mm-hmm. Oh, they were so good. And she would crochet. She taught me little steps to crochet. And then one day, I finally sat down and said, Grandmama, what did you all do when you were growing up, playing? And she talked about the little wheel, spinning the little wheel and the bottle down the street. She said she didn't have a lot of time to play because they had to work. And she told me about in the fall, they didn't have shoes to wear, so they would wrap their feet with corn leaves, stalks, whatever. And that's the way they would work before they went to school in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about her parents, who your grandmother's parents were?
I know their names.
Would you share their names with us, please?
Ooh, can I remember? They were Bars. I think my grandmother's mother was Rebecca. And I'm not sure whether my grandfather's name was Daniel. I'm not sure. I always have to go back and look. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember where they were from?
They were from the Nashville area.
And were they free? Or had they?
As far as I know, they were free. Mm-hmm. I've not been able to find anything to say that they were not. And I had a cousin. My daughter and I drove up to see the area they lived in. Mm-hmm. But they never said anything about being slaves. I haven't seen anything.
In whose land then was your grandmother working?
I don't know. I don't know. You've given me some things to go back and look. I was so happy to find their names and the names of the other siblings, but I do not know.
As an only child, did you spend a lot of time with your cousins, perhaps? You mentioned them.
I had no first cousins.
No first cousins.
No first cousins. No, it wasn't lonely. And I enjoyed it. I had a few very close friends. And sometimes I would go to visit them, and they would get to arguing with their siblings. It's kind of time for me to go home.
So was there anything that you feel that you got to experience that was special getting to live here on campus?
That was special? Oh, I tell you what we had during the time I was growing up. You could go on campus as a child and swim, and they had tennis lessons. Then we had movies on Saturday nights. And I mean top of the line movies, whatever you saw advertised, we saw it on campus. We also went to the basketball games, the football games, and you're talking about, we say superstars. We had people who came, Krystin Anderson was one. Of course, as time has gone by, we don't get that kind of entertainment anymore. And William L. Dawson was our musician of the time. And I used to ask Mr. Dawson, when was Krystin Anderson coming back? He said, baby, whenever we get some money. We just can't afford her. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a swimming pool on campus. Who taught you to swim, and when did you learn?
I started out, I guess, maybe around 7 or 8. But every summer I would have these terrible, terrible boils. And because the water was chlorine, I couldn't go in the water. Mm-hmm. So finally, one summer I made it through, and Neil Jackson, who was an Olympic star, taught me how to swim. She would get in the pool, come on, Lanice, come on. And she would tell me, now, I want you to hold out your hands. Still remember that lesson. And I'm going to catch you. And she did, and I would just go all the way across the pool. And finally, after about the 3rd or 4th time, she said, come on, you know I'm going to catch you. And I went all the way across the pool, and she was standing on the side looking at me, smiling. So we had that, and we ate crab apples, and of course, infantile paralysis was rampant at one part, and we were not allowed to go outside after, say, 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and we had to stay in until after 5.
Gotcha. Okay. So you knew how to swim at a young age. Do you have any
still don't swim.
Oh, you still don't? Really?
But my children and my grandson and my great-grandson, they swim. I don't swim.
Who was the person who taught you to swim again? What was their name?
Neil Jackson.
Neil Jackson. Mm-hmm.
Where would people go to a beach down here if they wanted to go to the ocean?
You have to go to Florida or somewhere over in Georgia. We're Pensacola down in the southern part of the state, Orange Beach.
Okay. And do you have any memories there?
No. A friend of mine was at had a meeting in Orange Beach, and her children were supposed to have joined her, and they couldn't come at the last minute, so I got to go down and see the beach from about 4 stories up. It was so cold, when we were.
I just have a couple of quick more personality responses. I'd like to get some feedback from you from Michelle Obama.
Love her. Oh, I just enjoy her. And when she came to Tuskegee, it was just heartwarming. I mean, she was so open. You know, when we go, what is it? When we go high, when we go low, we go high. When we go high, to something like that. But anyway, she used that phrase. And the kids, I think everybody just enjoyed her.
When you think about her time as First Lady of the United States and all her programs like the exercise and the garden and the White House, what would your response? How did you feel about that stuff when she was talking about it?
I think it's wonderful. And I hope some of us continue. You know how sometimes somebody's out there beating the band and we join them, but I wonder how often we continue, you know, once she's out of sight.
Now, this is a real political one. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But after President Obama, we changed presidents again, and it seems like he's kind of been around for a while. This whole Donald Trump experience with the country. If you were a mother to other people talking to them about them, or a grandmother saying, you know, how should we look at this? What kind of advice would you give to people in these times when we have, you know, politicians who, for whatever their political reasons, try to rile people up as opposed to bringing people together? Or do you even have any thoughts on that?
I do. I'm just so disappointed. I don't understand. I don't understand people's way of thinking, in particular about one candidate. I'm just lost. I don't understand. I just say read and listen, think for yourself.
Is there anyone in the past that you thought did a better job? If you can think of a leader, someone who you admired and you would say, if you want to do good and do good for people, you should be like this person. Is there someone you
I think Jimmy Carter is a very good example.
Why him? And bless President Carter. Now, right now he's in hospice, and his wife, she has Alzheimer's, so they've been in public service for a long time with Habitat for Humanity and all that. What is it about Carter that you admire?
I think it was his way of wanting to help people, and he did it in a very quiet, deliberate way. He just was an example of what you do. You want to help people, help them. You don't need to advertise what you do. People can see it.
I liked how he admitted he saw a UFO. I thought that was very interesting because the president said he saw something. I don't know what it was, but I saw something. And then he also said, he asked that question about him and his wife being together. He said, but I have lusted in my heart, occasionally. Kind of.
You said that a long time ago.
Yeah, he was very honest about it. That kind of honesty seems to be gone, doesn't it? No one will just say what's on their mind. They'll tell you that some kind of spin, but they don't really tell you what's on their mind and their heart.
Oh, God.
Thank you for answering that question. I appreciate you.
I'm also going to mention something and then just react whatever comes to mind. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Do you remember hearing anything about that? Or
when I heard about that, I'm trying to remember what kind of time frame. It had to have been, I guess, I didn't hear about it until the story broke, and then I didn't know what are you talking about? I had no idea. And when I think back about it, I had a friend, and I think she was trying to tell me that her father had been a part of that study. But I didn't understand, I didn't know what she was talking about. And he was, and her brother suffered some growth problems, and she at the end had kind of gone into Alzheimer's. And she called me one day and told me, I put my keys down. And she said, I can't find them. And she said, I'm not talking about how you put your keys and they fall in the sofa or they, you left them on the table. She said, I have lost my keys. And it wasn't long after that before she was in a nursing home. I do not know how it affected her mother. I don't recall. But I didn't know anything about the syphilis study.
Do you remember when the story broke?
Mm-hmm. And I'm still going, whoa, how did that happen? What happened? And one of the nurses was a public health nurse, and from time to time she would come to the school and give us shots. But we didn't know anything about the syphilis study, but the kids were just afraid of getting shots. And when the nurses were spotted, you could hear the screaming start on one end of the school, and it went all the way to the other end. And one of the nurses would just grab the kids. What are you hollering about? Boom. And they were gone. But no, and it's sad to me sometimes how we hear the stories, or the story about the syphilis study. I don't know.
I just want to say I think it's interesting how you talk about it, and other people I've heard from here that speak about it, they don't put the name of this institution at the front of it. They talk about the United States government study on syphilis.
But it was the United States government. It was not Tuskegee University, or for that matter, Tuskegee.
Do you think that's important to let people hear about it in that way, so
Yes.
they don't call it
Yeah.
a study and associate the name of this
It's
institution
been,
with it?
it's been the Tuskegee University syphilis study.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, I think that's the Tuskegee syphilis study, and I leave it alone, because some people can be very divided on what you call it and who was involved and who knew what when, and I just leave it as the Tuskegee University syphilis.
Thank you again.
And thank you for correcting me on how to refer to it. I'll carry that with me.
So yesterday, our group visited the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which honors lynchings that have happened. Did you ever hear of or know about lynchings in the area, or was there any fear of that?
There was a paper called the Pittsburgh Courier. And the Pittsburgh Courier would carry stories about lynchings. So yes, I had heard of lynchings at a very young age. Now, Emmett Till, I have never gotten over Emmett Till. I don't know whether I'm a couple of years older than he possibly, but I've carried him with me forever. The story was just so sad, and he was near my age, and I just couldn't imagine something happening to him as it did. And I still hold Emmett close.
And in your time in learning, have you found out about any lynchings in this area or nearby?
No, there may have been maybe one or two in Macon County. I'm not sure. I need to go back and check on that.
Okay.
Just one more quick one. You mentioned the Pittsburgh Courier, and for many African Americans, finding out news about the movement came from the Chicago Defender or the Baltimore African American, the Pittsburgh Courier, because the local newspapers that were owned by the white publishers wouldn't carry the story.
That's
so
right.
Did you find that there were times when there was news that you knew was, oh, that's in an area I'm familiar with, but the only place you could find out about it would have been the Pittsburgh Courier or the Baltimore African American or, the Chicago Defender?
That's it.
How did you get those papers? Was it the
Oh,
barbershop?
we had a little drugstore. up the street, and they would deliver the papers whatever day they came out.
So you wouldn't get the local newspaper, but the Pittsburgh Courier was your daily newspaper when you could get it.
Well, yeah. But we had the Montgomery Advertiser every day in the Atlanta Constitution. But they carry those stories. You had to get Ebony and Jet and y'all know what magazines I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. We've been to the barbershop. Great, thank you.
I want to ask about, you mentioned the infantile paralysis being prominent and being rampant at a time. What other, I guess, fears did your parents or community parents in the area may have had about health?
Well, you know, I guess we were kind of blessed because we had this place, which was John Andrew Memorial Hospital. And people came from everywhere to this hospital for treatment. So that's the only thing I can think of that, you know, kind of struck fear in the hearts of the neighborhood. Because we all had measles and mumps, chicken pox, you know, and tried to get it. So
Trying to go to school.
You mentioned your book, Tuskegee University Cemetery Stories. I'd love to hear more about some of the stories at the cemetery that you found.
Well, there was one gentleman, and my memory gets short on some of these things, but he had heard about Booker T. Washington's work. He was from somewhere out west. And he came to Tuskegee to visit. And when he got through looking around, he asked if when he got to the point where he could not take care of himself, if the university would put him up in the hospital. And he left Tuskegee a lot of money. I never have been able to find out the exact amount, but he is here and he's buried out in the cemetery. We had several single ladies who lived on campus, and one of them loved herself some basketball. And she would go to all the basketball games. Her name, we called her Mother Watkins. And she must have been in her late 60s or so, but she could jump up and down with the best of them, cheering the team on. Then we have Coach Abbott, who was all-around coach. He and his wife took young women everywhere to participate, you know, in whatever athletic sport there was at the time. They couldn't stay in hotels and they couldn't eat everywhere, so they would pack lunches and get the girls going. Mm-hmm. And of course we have William L. Dawson, who was a well-known musician, and P.H. Polk, who took many, 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 many pictures on this campus. All of our presidents are buried out there with the exception of Moton, who's buried in Virginia. Washington and his three wives. And of course Moton was next, and then Patterson and Foster and Peyton. That we've had 2 or 3 presidents since then, and I can't get them straight.
I want to go back. Well, actually, real question. Do you know your mother's recipe for the cake with strawberry icing?
Yes, I do, because she told me, I think you ought to try making this cake yourself. And I would say, but Mama, it won't taste like yours. And it didn't, but I had to learn the hard way that all of us can use the same recipe. They will not taste alike. It just won't taste alike. But yes, and for the last 2 or 3 years, I have not made myself a strawberry cake. Just couldn't get around to it.
Well, definitely, maybe this year it'll be time to pull it back out and get going.
Try it again. Maybe so.
Maybe so.
But I never thought I'd outgrow this wonderful strawberry cake. But alas.
And I want to ask if you still do you still garden?
No.
Do you know?
My thumbs are kind of funny looking. They're not green. I tried so hard to keep that garden going. I just couldn't make it.
So I know that I've heard about it growing up that women had to learn certain household skills, including like sewing, ironing. Did you have to sew anything?
We had sewing class in the grade school. Well, we had it in high school too. Yes, I put some things together with some thread. Only I would wear it.
Okay.
Yeah, I had things to do at home. I had to iron those tablecloths and pillowcases. I ironed my own clothes. I would pray my mother wouldn't go out of town too much because that meant I had to iron my father's shirts. I had to sweep, I had to mop, I had to hang up clothes on the line downstairs. We didn't have a dryer then. Empty trash, whatever, but I shopped. Guess that was about the main thing.
And you said you hope your mother wouldn't stay away too long. What were the trips that she was usually going on?
Oh, she would go to visit my grandmother.
Okay, so to Nashville.
Well, I guess it was the trips to Kansas. She'd be gone so long. Ooh.
Wow. Okay. And did you ever accompany her on this trip?
Oh, yeah. And then my children and I would go with her.
What was it like traveling from Alabama to Kansas? Was there a big difference?
Well, it wasn't too bad. Of course, when we first started traveling, they would put a curtain up in the train, and you were not to sit in front of the curtain. Was it the other way around? I can't remember now, but anyway, they would put a curtain up, and you either had to sit in front of it or behind it. And we would always take a lunch. Wonder why? We could take that chicken and eat that chicken that 24 hours, and now you almost get sick. It just seems like it just doesn't hold up as well as it did back in the day.
I want to ask about going back to your childhood a little bit. What were perhaps games you may have played with your friends?
Oh, we played checkers, and we played, was it marbles? Yeah. Pick up sticks. We played canasta. What else did we play? I had a lot of dogs. I loved my dogs.
Dogs.
Dogs. My friends didn't seem too crazy, but I was the one crazy about the dogs. We rode bicycles, and we rode scooters. We would skate. I dodged the steep hills.
Do you still have your dolls?
Most of them I do.
Wow.
My children got loose on some of them, and they're in pieces, but they're there. And my mother had a dog. Well, she had it when she was little, and I had it restored.
Wow.
And then I had I just had hers restored.
Wow. Card games? Did you play card games, or perhaps was your parents' house parties and play card games?
My mother played bridge. She liked to play bridge. My father brought me a little deck of cards once we called Arthur cards. Are you all familiar with those?
I don't think so.
It's like instead of 4 aces, you would have 4 of Shakespeare, and you would play the cards like that. Hearts. I don't remember what else.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add or say before we end our interview? Anything?
I told almost all I know.
Then I would love for you to round us up with just one more thing. Is Tuskegee still the oasis that you remember it being?
No, it is not. We had maybe 10 or 12 dry cleaners. We had stores, so you could almost walk to the store. I have no stores between my house now and downtown. If I wanted some milk, I have to go all the way downtown and get the milk. And then the little stores that were on the corners, one of them closed because they can't find anyone to work. So you almost have to go out of town for things. I don't even know whether they sell socks anymore or not, or needle and thread.
What contributed to that? What contributed to that?
Oh, part of it was that white flight. And then part of it, again, not having, I think, a mixed community. You know, you just gotta have a mixed community. And I think that's a part of it.
Mixed as far as Black people, white people, other people. All right. Well, if there's nothing else that you'd like to add, thank you so, so much for speaking with us today. On behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, we had a great time. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all of us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yes, we appreciate you. Thank you.
You play the middle or the top? Oh my goodness.
That was nice.